Hey friends, welcome back to Thriving Online Healing Podcast. This is episode 73, and we're going to talk about parasites.
Yeah, so I think that I like to bring up parasites for a couple of different reasons. One, for some reason in the US, we have this idea, and even within conventional medicine, the parasites are not a problem within the US. Which isn't entirely realistic. All other countries have parasite issues. Europe, Asia, Australia, right? New Zealand, all mammals have the potential to be a host for parasites. Okay. I think in the US, oftentimes we think of parasites as like affecting folks in third world countries, right? Or like
they don't cook their food, or they don't wear shoes, or they're drinking dirty water, they're not washing their hands. Yeah,
exactly. They may not have the best access to good hygiene. You think of that with parasites. But that's not entirely true, right? Even in the US, there are some of us that may not have access to great hygiene either. But even for folks who do have good hygiene, we've got access to clean water, we can still get parasites, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to bring this up because sometimes it's kind of becoming a little bit more on people's radar, this idea of, okay, maybe I have a parasite infection. And parasites can include things like helminths or worms. It can be kind of that umbrella term. When I'm talking about parasites today, I'm kind of talking more about parasites that live in our gut. But know that we can also have things like worms, like pinworms or roundworms or even hookworms are pretty common as well. I see folks who suffer from pinworms. It's usually like families with little kids. Pinworms, if you're not familiar with them, it's usually the biggest symptom is anal itching. They're very small little worms that will come out of the anus at night. And so kids will scratch the perianal area. And then they get worms on their fingers, and then they're like exposing to other people in the house, or it's getting in their clothes or their sheets, right? And then they're not washing the clothes right away because they're little kids. They just know that their butt itches. Right. So mostly you see, like in the pediatric world, right, we see pinworms a little bit more often. And those are I don't know, very contagious. But then we've heard of like hookworms, right? If you're walking around barefoot and you especially if you've had dogs or cats who've had hookworms that are in the area, and they've got feces in the yard, whether it's new or whether it's dried up. Those hookworms are then occupy the soil, and if you walk around barefoot, we run that risk of getting hookworms. So those are common in that sense. But when we're talking about parasites, those worms can also affect our gut health. What I see with the parasites is that oftentimes people will have digestive issues, right? They'll have trouble like eating. They don't have a very large selection of foods they can eat, right? Every time they eat, they feel terrible. They either don't have any energy, they have gas or bloating, things go right through them. Like they may eat and they may get diarrhea right away. People may not have, they may either be losing weight and they're not able to maintain their weight, or sometimes even it may look like a lot of inflammation and people can't lose weight because they're bloated, because they're inflamed all the time. Right. And oftentimes when people start this journey of trying to figure out what's going on with their gut, they usually stumble on candida. And because candida is a yeast, it could be considered parasitic, but it's actually a yeast overgrowth, and it can manifest in a lot of different symptoms as well, like with the gut health, with rashes on the skin, with headaches, with brain fog, with just fatigue, muscle aches. And then they go through a candida regimen, cutting out sugars, right? Maybe even some anti-candida herbs, but they're not feeling better. Yeah. Right. There may be a little bit improvement, maybe, like anywhere from 10, 30, maybe 40% improvement, but there's still something there. Right. The best way to identify parasites is on like a complete stool analysis. It looks for parasites. It looks for the eggs or the larvae of parasites, because all parasites have a life cycle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so sometimes when we go to address parasites, we have to figure out different therapies to address the life cycle of the parasites, right? Because it goes from like an egg to a larva to a pupa to the parasite. Yeah. And some parasites have affinities for different organ systems. So but on a stool analysis, on a complete stool analysis, it looks at the bacteria that you have, like the probiotics. It looks at the pathogenic bacteria, then like the commensal or like the squatters bacteria. And then, it looks at the parasites. It does look at yeast and fungus as well. And so I have a lot of folks, that's where we identify the parasites, because they've done everything else and it helped, but it didn't get them over that, hump. And so we're, and then when you identify what parasitic infection it is, then you can target that specifically with antimicrobials, with herbs and that sort of thing, to address that parasitic infection. And then usually it's on a rotating schedule, right, to address. So, okay, if you know that that parasite has a life cycle of say 7 days or 10 days, right, or 2 weeks, then you may have to redose again in 10 days or 2 weeks to catch any eggs that weren't in the adult form.
Gotcha.
Yet. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are, so when all else fails, right, we wanted to talk about this today because I wanted to kind of take that stigma away from the idea of parasites, right? All mammals to some extent have the opportunity to get parasites, whether it's goats, pigs, cows, chickens, dogs, and cats.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're mammals just the same. So we have that, opportunity as well. So for some folks, it's important to dig a little bit deeper and try to identify, okay, maybe this is, maybe my root cause could be parasites.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of the reason I asked Carmen to do this episode on this is because I'm not a goat farmer. I have goats. And I had a baby that was sick, and I took him to the vet, and we figured out that like he has worms and he had coccidiosis, right? And as the vet was talking to me about it, he's like, he's young, he's only 4 months. He's like, it has to do with their feces, right? Because I guess that's where they shed off the worms and the eggs. He is like, there's somewhere that they're always in their feces. And so when they lay down, they're getting it on their fur, and then they're licking their fur, right? And that's how they're like just spreading it.
Yes.
So it made me think like, well, because if you've ever had goats like poop everywhere, right? Like they eat, they poop, they eat, it's just everywhere, right? These tiny little babies. And I was thinking like, gosh, that's everywhere in my yard, like, because they're all over my acreage, right? And and I understand mammals are mammals, right? If they're doing that, then my dogs are walking around in that. Like potentially my dogs could have that, right? And then I was like, but wait, I'm a mammal. I'm walking around out there. I have shoes on, but I have to mess with them, so I'm touching them, right?
You're petting them. Yeah.
Right. But sometimes I might maybe I forget that one time and I don't wash my hands well enough. Like oh, like this is how this stuff is spread and you don't even recognize it, and recognizing that I am part of their mammal world. So I'm just as
Right.
susceptible to it as they are because I'm in close proximity to them.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't always think of that, right? But yeah, if you go out and you say you pet the goats, right? You brush them, you pet the dogs, you come in, you know, uh
I
don't
pick
wash
up a
your hands right
shit,
away.
I eat a
Yeah.
shit, and I don't even think about it.
Yeah. Pick up an apple or something. Yeah. And you start eating it. Yeah, you potentially could be exposing yourself. Yeah, to parasites.
I like
Now
how.
here's the
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So here's the thing. And so parasites again are something foreign, right? So kind of like what we talked about last week. So the immune system can kill parasites.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a matter of timing. So it's when you get when that parasite enters the host, right? Whether it's us mammals or dogs or cats or goats or cows, to when the parasite enters the cell and starts replicating.
Mm.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
smart.
Well, sometimes it enters the tissue and starts replicating. Doesn't really enter cells like the virus does.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So it's a matter of that timing, right? So the immune system can still kill parasites if it identifies it in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, some of those parasites have adapted to bury within tissues very quickly so that it can evade the immune system.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens in goats. Like what do they call it? The barber pole worms.
Yes.
They attach into their one of their stomach linings.
Yes. Yeah. So as soon as when it gets into the tissue, it's very hard for the immune system to find it, right? Because the immune system's always looking for things in the bloodstream or in the extracellular space. And once it gets intracellular or in the tissues, it's harder to find.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so some livestock are susceptible to like a wider array of parasites than humans are, but still susceptible. We're still susceptible. Yeah. So back in the day, at least in areas, if you guys have heard of poke salad,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
poke salad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So poke is anti-parasitic, right? It's also anti-helminthic, so it's great against worms as well. So used to, right? Poke comes up in the early spring. You make poke salad out of the new growth
Yeah.
of those the new baby green leaves, and usually you cook it and you boil it and you boil it and you strain it, you boil it and strain it like 3 or 4 times, and then you've got poke salad.
Yep.
Well, back in the day, they would use poke salad and they may only boil it once and strain it, maybe once, maybe twice. So you're still getting that anti-parasitic properties, and so they would line like you would eat it for like they bring it to Sunday church brunch or whatever, potluck, and then people eat it and then they'd be lined up in the bathroom going to the bathroom because it would clear you out, but it was anti-parasitic, right?
It was
So a
clearing
lot of
at the same time it was taking all the parasites and the worms with it.
exactly.
Yeah.
There are a lot of herbs that come out in the spring that are anti-parasitic, and if we look at sort of how maybe not the life cycle, but like how our behavior changes in the winter, or you think like to our ancestors or even like to pioneers, right? In the winter, you have less access to greens, you have more access to like dehydrated or preserved meats, right? Which can sometimes have parasites in it. And you're not getting out as much in the winter time, right? People are more sluggish in the winter time. So in the springtime, when all those new growth of those weeds that are anti-parasitic come on, or that are very high in nutrients, you increase those in your diet to help kind of clear things through that may have, taken over in the winter time. So that's how, our pioneers used to do it. That's how early, humans did it. And so we've adapted away from that because,
there's a grocery store.
We've got grocery stores, so we've got access to different kinds of foods all year long. But it can still be very helpful to do a parasitic cleanse maybe once a year or so, just to keep, and especially if you've got symptoms, right, that doesn't seem to be addressed by other diets or other, anti candida or other antibacterial protocols. It's worth looking into.
So I want to, because I can hear a lot of people that are like a little skeptical and like, well, I don't have animals. Where can you, like the suburban American, pick this up?
Sure. So oftentimes it's still going to be from our food, right? So we can still get parasites. So if we're talking about worms, right, we can still get parasites and worms from uncooked food, things like sushi, right? Yeah, that's a big common one. Shellfish, even, right? Like if you're eating, things like raw oysters, or I don't think people eat raw shrimp, but if you prepare and cook raw shrimp, and you don't wash your hands, say you're, shelling the shrimp and you're like deveining the shrimp and put it in the pot to boil, and you don't wash your hands and you reach for that chip or something that you're snacking on, you could potentially be getting parasites from there, right? Other shellfish, oysters, clams, things like that, if you're messing with them before you cook them, scallops even, sushi's an obvious one. Pork, if people are eating pork, right, that's not entirely cooked, those parasites can live in meats, even beef to a certain extent. This might upset a lot of people, but if you're eating meat or beef that is rare or medium rare, right, could have parasites in it.
How many of us don't eat like medium? Like I eat medium cooked steak that's still red in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, medium rare is my favorite, but there are people out there who, my mom won't, she'll only cook it if it's well done, or only eat it if it's well done.
Yeah.
If it's pink at all, she sends it back.
Yeah, but that's what we could be picking up, right? It's because we're trying to eat that. Yeah.
Yes. So you could be getting parasites from that if you're eating like maybe not in suburban America, but if you're eating delicacies and you're trying new things like tripe, if that tripe is not cleaned or processed well, as often you find it in like Mexican dishes or Hispanic dishes, you can get parasites from that as well. Now, they also live in the dirt. So if you play in the dirt, if you've got kids that play in the dirt, those kids touch themselves, they touch you, right? You have the opportunity to get a parasitic, spread that way as well. Yeah. And it's one of those things, I don't want to discourage people from playing in the dirt, because alongside parasites, there's also a lot of really great soil microorganisms that our body actually need. Yeah. So this is another perspective in making sure that our immune system is optimal. Yeah. Because we know if we do grounding or earthing, or if you're playing in the garden, you're playing in the dirt, you're exposing your body to soil microbes. There's some probiotics that are soil probiotics that are essential for our health. So I don't want you to think, gosh, everything has to be sterile.
We just have to like normalize it. Like, look, we're mammals. The mammal world just deals with parasites and worms, and like we exclude ourselves from that, but we're just another mammal. It's not a big deal. We just need to be aware of it. Like I was joking with Carmen before this. I just was like, I'm gonna line them all up. We got all the goats, we got the dogs, we got the cat, we got the husband, we got the wife. Like we're all just ivermectin it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a bad idea once a year just to kind of get a clean slate. Because we're exposed to a lot more parasites than we know, or that we even recognize.
Yeah.
But alongside not even just beef, but even chicken, fish can have parasites in it as well. And so it buries in the lining of the stomach, it buries in the tissues. And some parasites are heat resistant. So even if you're cooking them, that doesn't always usually kills the majority of the parasites, but there are some species that are heat resistant. Yeah.
You know what my that is? Like we cook it and then my stomach acid will go ahead and kill it. That was like my thought process before this.
Yes. Yeah.
My stomach acid will kill whatever. Because I am notorious for like putting yogurt in my backpack and leaving it in the car for a day or two and then eating it. Fine.
Yeah. And for the most part, that's not always a bad thing, but it helps that if your immune system is 100%, that if there is something in there that shouldn't be, that your immune system will take care of that as well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
I think that's it. Yeah. Hopefully that gives folks a different perspective and just kind of even puts parasites on the radar. If they're experiencing some symptoms that haven't been able to be addressed by other protocols and what they're doing, consider adding this as a potential for a root cause for your situation.
Yeah. And like if this is something that's on your radar, and probably if you're listening to this podcast, like you're already into holistic wellness, like this is gonna be something you probably need to take to your licensed naturopathic physician. Yes. So then they can help you with it and get a stool sample and give a protocol.
Exactly. So they can give you specific recommendations to address whatever species of parasites that might be involved. Yeah. In your situation.
Sometimes I go rogue and I'm like, I'll just handle it all. Like we'll just all line up and do it. It's fine.
I'm always going to recommend it's going to be a little better if you had a practitioner follow you and give you specific advice.
Yeah. So if you guys are looking, Dr. Carmen's amazing. She is my physician. You know how much I love her. And so if you're looking, I totally recommend that you reach out. She has a website, Dr. Carmen Jones. I always link it in the bio of the notes. She does telehealth calls, Zoom calls, she'd be an amazing physician if you're looking for a licensed naturopathic physician, because there is a difference.
There is.
We'll do an episode about that.
True. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Again, if you could leave us a review wherever you're listening to, we would totally appreciate that. It helps whatever way you're listening to, tells them that there's value in this. So then they expose us to other people, so we can get this information out to more and more people. Thank you guys so much for your time and listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.